Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we are going to look at the North Node in Pisces and South Node in Virgo. These two are just about to switch signs this month from Aries and Libra. They move backwards, and I wanted to take this through the signs to show you where it is in your own personal life this is going to be impacting you. I have just gone through all of these points in the previous video. So if that's something of interest to you as to what the nodal axis is and getting in depth on what the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo will mean for us on a collective level, you can check out that video. But I do quickly just want to point out that as I go through this for each sign, do keep in mind that wherever it is that the North Node is in your chart, that simultaneously Saturn and Neptune will be leaving that sign. So the area of your life where there's going to be changes coming up in the coming year and a half with the North Node here, what it is that's likely to be coming in, it's probably something that has seemed, or it's an area of your life that has seemed to require a lot of hard work for breakthrough to see really any effect from it at all. And it's probably been an area of your life that's been pretty confusing since 2011, and additionally then more complicated and requiring more effort since March of 2023. So the nodal axis shift this time is hugely more important. You're probably going to feel it so much more because this is a big shift. It's like things are complicated, they're kind of up in the air, they require a lot of work, and yet the reward doesn't quite seem to be there. That aspect is leaving, and simultaneously there's this big kind of heavy hitter of the nodal axis, the North Node, moving into that area and making sharp changes with very little effort. So like sharp changes that seem to almost come out of nowhere. So that is something to keep in mind, is that as I go through all the signs and I'm talking about the North Node, this is also an area of your life that has seemed very challenging recently, and a lot of those challenges are probably going to be bound up with the breakthroughs that you're experiencing in the coming year and a half. But yeah, with all of that said, I do also want to point out that I am running currently the Chart Your Destiny giveaway, which is I'm giving away a free personal chart reading to a subscriber, and I'm really excited about this. So if you're subscribed, just leave a comment below with your zodiac sign or otherwise your favorite placement in your chart. So a given planet in a sign or a house or an aspect pattern or anything you might know about your chart that's your favorite thing. Otherwise, your zodiac sign is perfectly fine, as well as giving the video a like. And this will enter you into the giveaway. So if you're interested in a personal astrological reading, you can get that for free by doing that. And then on March 1st, I will be announcing the winner. And otherwise, if you find that you do like this video, I definitely appreciate a thumbs up. It helps me to grow the channel. It helps me with the algorithm to spread the video around. So I very much appreciate that. And with all of that said, let's get into it. Okay, so for Aries, we have the North Node in Pisces in your 12th house and the South Node in Virgo in your 6th house. So this is really all about releasing control. The North Node is what we should be bringing in more, and the South Node is what we should try not to rely too much on during this period of time. And the 6th house tends to be an area where we're getting things done. We're really putting in a lot of effort. We're trying to control matters in the sense of trying to put a lot of effort into a certain area to achieve a specific outcome. And so there can be an over-reliance on that. So an over-reliance on a routine that can seem like it's going to guarantee a certain outcome. Not to mention the standards that you have for yourself that, again, are about achieving a specific outcome. And so, of course, there can also then be over-analyzing, trying to really control details. And of course, in the world that we live in, where we tend to feel like we really need to be perfect about everything because slippage in certain areas can have a certain slippery slope kind of effect on us. it can be pretty natural to, again, try and just control these things, try to think things through, try to come up with solutions and push your way through any given situation. But again, also a need to kind of let go of that hyper focus on productivity, the hyper focus on even trying to achieve certain outcomes when it comes to your physical health. I definitely wouldn't encourage letting yourself go in that way where you're not holding your health as a priority. It definitely should be. And that's where the nodes can get a little bit complicated, is it's like, we definitely don't want to overlook that area, because while we're being encouraged to orient ourselves toward the North Node, we do still have changes occurring on both sides. But the thing here is that when we're dealing with the 12th house, it's like, this is the area of spirit. You know, this is the area of the things that happen that are outside of our control, often that are trying to lead us to something greater, to something that we can't quite see, that we can't quite understand, and needing to surrender to that in a really strong way. And so that's what I mean about like trying not to over control things. But I wouldn't say to just drop your health routines. I definitely want to reiterate that repeatedly, is do keep an eye on your physical health, but also then focus on that mental and emotional health, and then work those muscles of more along the lines of spiritual reliance. So there can be little weird things that happen around this time, since we have the North Node in the 12th house. This is an area that's difficult for us to see. It's difficult for us to ascertain really what is going on, but it's an area where there's something greater than ourselves that is in control of that area. And so while it may seem like things are happening to us, or it may seem like there's a frustrating lack of control, do try and understand that the things that are unfolding around this time are actually controlled by something that probably has a broader view than we do anyway, you know, so it's in better hands than even our own. So what this is orienting you toward is a greater focus on those spiritual concerns, on exercising those faith muscles, trying not to focus too much on, again, like the short-term vision of, okay, well, this event happened, and so I don't want for that to happen because of X, Y, and Z. And so I perceive of this as something that is bad or weird or whatnot, that I would rather not have happening. But ultimately, a few months down the line, a year down the line, 5 years down the line, we can, of course, look back on things and recognize, well, I wasn't fond of that at the time, but I recognize now how it was actually really excellent for me. So again, embracing that sense of surrender to what's going on. But again, this isn't about just not doing anything or not pursuing anything. You certainly should. And especially when it comes to things that are hitting you as an intuitive push. So you may also find that there's not a logical or practical or rational reason why you're feeling the need to pursue something. For instance, an interest, or maybe a book that just kind of catches your eye. And I'll just give an example. If you are a student and you have certain classes, you need to read certain books for that, and so on. If a random book kind of catches your eye, it may feel like, well, no, I shouldn't do that because I need to focus on my studies. There may be something there that's really pulling you and trying to introduce something to you that is really important. So it's not that you should just, of course, drop your studies because of this, but allowing that wiggle room, allowing for that, what we might perceive as human beings in this, 3D space, so to say, we may see it as something frivolous or not super important, or that it shouldn't be a priority. But there may be something there where it's like, yes, okay, take care of your studies, but then also introduce yourself to whatever this idea is that will probably lead to a bit of a reorientation. So again, paying attention to that intuition, paying attention also to your subconscious as much as you possibly can. Of course, there's tons that goes on there that we can't fully understand, but to the extent that you're able, try and pay attention to what is underlying your perspective, what's underlying your behavior, your actions, all along those lines. If you're able to tap into that at least one or two levels more as to what's genuinely motivating you there, that can also be really, really helpful and is definitely called for during this time. But yeah, ultimately, this is an orientation toward healing, but it's a type of healing that's deeper than just, say, your physical health. It's about, again, those patterns, mental and emotional health, how you're feeling about your health, how you're feeling about your health affects your health, things along these lines that are a little bit more abstract, a little bit more ethereal. You're being oriented to turn your mind and your focus significantly more in that direction than just the day-to-day mundane trying to take care of things. So if this requires that you create a bit of time for that, I would definitely encourage that around this period of time as well. But yeah, that is what I have for you, Aries. Okay, so for Taurus, we have the North Node in your 11th house and the South Node in your 5th house. So this is all about your social relationships as well as your own personal enjoyment and the things that you are generally interested in personally. So this is orienting you to focus a bit more on those social connections, the things that you do together with people, and the actions that you take with people. There may be an orientation toward humanitarian concerns or getting involved with groups that are focused on trying to alleviate certain situations for people, since we also have Pisces involved here. So an orientation toward those social connections, finding community. Again, this may be of a spiritual or humanitarian bent, considering we have an overlap of the 11th house with Pisces here. Pisces is all about the higher good. It's about compassion and trying to alleviate concerns for other people. And then the 11th house is that social orientation, groups, the people that we spend time with, the people that are able to help us out, and vice versa, as well as our hopes and dreams and things like this out in the broader world for ourselves. So additionally, along the lines of those hopes and dreams and so forth, they can take on, again, a Piscean quality during this period of time that is heightened. This is a natural placement for your houses, but it's getting highlighted very strongly here as well. So this could become a lot more visionary or creative. There may be a sense, again, of a humanitarian orientation, even in your creative works. This is something that Pisces really loves to do. If you think of poets who are, or songwriters, musicians, and so on, who have a great focus on how the behavior of different people has an impact on others. Often there's an underlying Piscean quality to that, like, for instance, Kurt Cobain with his son and several other placements in Pisces. And then I know I just looked at Anthony Kiedis, and he has its Jupiter in Pisces and so forth. So there can be an overlap there where it's both creative and socially oriented, in the sense of wanting for things to be easier for other people and taking the hurt of others on board personally as well, and trying to express sympathy toward that end. Additionally, there can be a reorientation here toward placing some more faith in groups and other people, not feeling like you need to take everything on your own shoulders to do, and also not feeling the need to kind of pick apart different people's motivations within, say, a group or an organization or whatnot, but rather there's an encouragement to have some trust and faith in the group, the collective here. And a lot of this is going to require that releasing of this kind of criticism of your own self-expression. So, of course, you naturally have Virgo in your 5th house, which can be a bit of a challenge when it comes to creative output and creative expression on a personal level, because you could feel like it's never quite at the standard that you're wanting it to be in some way or another. So there can be a bit of a picking apart of your own expression here. And so there's an encouragement here to release that kind of critical nature here. Again, accepting imperfection with Pisces. And again, the risk there with that perfectionism is that projects could then fall apart, in the sense of, how do I want to put this? Not reaching that final stage, not reaching that dissemination or release to other people, because it never is perfect. Nothing is ever perfect. So being willing to, again, put things out into groups, and this does require a certain amount of trust, but you're being asked to have that trust. So trusting that you will get a good response. And there's probably something that's coming up for you along these lines where that trust is being developed. So because of the fact that we have this alignment here, I wouldn't expect that you're being set up to reinforce your belief that you shouldn't release this out here. So there will be acceptance of your expression throughout this period of time as well. Not to mention the expectations in love and creativity, also with your children, friends, and so on and so forth. Allow for those expectations, those boundaries, those relationships to be pretty fluid during this period of time. This is all about developing trust within society, within your interaction with society, and the health of that. Additionally, there's likely to be changes along these lines. So again, I think that the changes are orienting you toward trust. So there may be people coming into your life with the eclipses that are going to be taking place in your 11th house that can have you joining different social circles than you have been in prior, and possibly releasing some as well. For instance, any that have reinforced your sense of needing to perfect something before you can express it outward, that would be, I think, the most likely to need to be released around this time. So if that is something where you say something that is heartfelt, especially from the 5th house there, and you feel like you get pushback, there's probably, again, a reorientation to you along those lines. But yeah, I think that is what I have for you, Taurus. Okay, so for Gemini, we have the North Node in Pisces in your 10th house and the South Node in Virgo in your 4th house. So this is all about personal life and career or public life balance. So there's a need here to align these two so that they're not interfering with each other. With the North Node in Pisces, there is a focus on your career, but with Pisces here, there's also a need to not be too rigid along those lines. So this isn't just about pushing, achieving. This is about making sure that things are in alignment, making sure that you're on the same page with others, making sure even that you're on the same page with yourself, that the effort that you're putting into this is leading you in the direction that you're wanting to go in, or that you strongly feel that you should be going in. Now, if there's also any changes that are arising within your career during this period of time, and typically these are going to be relatively positive with the North Node in your 10th house, but again, with Pisces, it can be a bit ethereal. So sometimes things can look like they're annoying, or like they are something that you're not that fond of, that maybe you would not have specifically chosen. But for you with Pisces in your 10th, you kind of do just need to go with it and trust that it's leading you in a good direction. And this is something you've had some practice with, having Neptune in this 10th house since 2011. That's now moving on, and things are becoming a lot more clear through some pretty big changes along these lines that are now concretizing a new direction in your life with regard to your public standing, your reputation, your legacy, your career, and so forth. Now, there may be more of an incorporation of creativity or imagination in this area of your life as well, because it's heightening the impact of that Piscean 10th house of yours. And again, with Pisces here, there is a need to be flexible and to go with the flow to an extent, to be allowing, to be accepting of certain changes that arise. And so letting go of these kind of rigid ambitions or expectations and trusting that there may not be a linear path here, but with the North Node, in so many cases, this won't be the case for all of us. I have Gemini rising, so I'll speak for myself as well. This may not be the case for absolutely everyone, but with the North Node here, you can also see leaps and bounds when you're dealing with a fluid path to success, when you're dealing with something that isn't quite linear. So it may not be the way that things unfold for everyone else, but comparing yourself to others around this period of time as well, with regard to, again, your public standing, your career, and so forth, won't really be serving you. This is really just about accepting that path, the way that it's laid out for you. Additionally, with the North Node here, you can be being seen as more mature, more put together, like you have kind of reached a graduation point in your personality and the way that you are coming off, as well as maturation is also a major theme when we're dealing with the North Node. Now, a lot of that potential rigidness or potential perfectionism is coming from Virgo in the 4th house here. So we have the South Node there, which means that we should be releasing some of this. We shouldn't be over relying on it. So that perfectionism, trying to release that. Also with regard to your home and family. So if there's a need to balance this out more, try not to be too hard on yourself if there are bumps along the way. If things don't, again, look exactly like you think that they're going in other people's families and in their careers. Of course, we only see the kind of facade of things. We don't know how things are going for others. So comparing ourselves to others in either of these areas or any other area isn't really all that helpful. Additionally, the emotional patterns that you have, especially from family, and especially what they say about the way that you do family and the way that you do your career and the way that these things have unfolded for you, releasing those critical patterns, releasing those perfectionistic patterns is called for during this time as well. Again, finding a balance between work and personal life is going to be coming up repeatedly throughout the coming year and a half or so for you. Now, also with this being your home and where you live, there can be a sense of feeling that you've outgrown a place and feeling that you have outgrown some matter within your family. So you may feel the need to move on in some way, whether it be where you're living or, again, some pattern of behavior within your family. I would also expect changes along these lines. So, of course, that can mean a change in where you're living, a change in your family, whether that be additions or growing apart from people with the nodal axis here, or losses or changing dynamics. There can also be major healing. And I think that that's probably also why some of these patterns are arising to be looked at and dealt with, is to heal along those lines as well. And of course, similar changes, additions, reorientations to your public life, to your career as well throughout this coming year and a half. And that could easily be promotions, but also a leg up can sometimes look like, from human eyes, being pushed out of something, and not necessarily in the sense of like losing your job, but being really dissatisfied in a certain way, or recognizing that something is kind of intolerable, can be a marker of a need to change your orientation toward your work, the amount of emphasis that you put on the people that you're dealing with or the situation that you're dealing with, or need to change that work or that career in order to make it more comfortable for you as well. But yeah, that is pretty much what I have for you, Gemini. Okay, so for Cancer, we have the North Node in your ninth house and the South Node in your third house. So, with the North Node in Pisces in your ninth house, this has a very strong spiritual orientation to it. So, there could be a major emphasis on your philosophy, your worldview around this period of time and expansion along those lines. The North Node tends to indicate increase. So, there could be additional studies, things that you're diving into, especially if it is of some sort of a philosophical nature. There could be opportunities to travel. You are encouraged to travel with the North Node in your ninth house there. But additionally, travel not just physical, but in your mind. So exploration, learning more about different types of people, different ways of doing life, different perspectives on life in order to expand your perception, your perspective along these lines as well. And again, a lot of this could be very spiritually oriented too. Now, if you do wind up in some unfamiliar experiences through this kind of expansion and exploration, there are also then opportunities to trust your intuition in navigating those kinds of situations. So, developing and increasing your sense of internal guidance as to what to take on board, what maybe doesn't resonate quite so much with you. If you're in an unfamiliar physical place, this can help you to understand behavioral patterns of people outside of yourself more as to whether you trust something or not. This is really all about developing your own trust in your own perspective, your own perception of a situation, and the extent to which you want to open yourself up along those lines, or again, what isn't resonating with you. So there's an expansion of your worldview, your beliefs. Mysticism may also arise with Pisces in this ninth house as well, and potentially creative philosophies. So the overlap between spirituality and creativity could definitely arise around this period of time as well, in terms of something that you're interested in, or in terms of something that is being introduced to you to contribute to as well. Additionally, along these lines, there's certain modalities that are kind of spiritually oriented, but then also have an impact on your day-to-day life. So whether it be like healing methods or, even alternative medicine or yoga, meditation, things like this, not only would that expand your mind, but I think that it would also have a positive impact on your day-to-day. Now, there can also be, in addition to being encouraged to travel, you could feel a pull to go somewhere or even to move. So this could be a temporary thing. It could be a permanent thing. But there is, again, there's this kind of pull to expand. And so there could be a different location or a different culture or something like this that's also pulling you in that direction. And it's an urge toward growth is ultimately what's underpinning that. It's a desire to experience something that you haven't experienced before in order to grow and develop and mature through that process. Now, additionally, the ninth house has to do with publishing, writing, disseminating information out into the world to be received. And so if that's something that is coming up for you around this time, this would actually be a pretty decent time to do that, because it's likely that there would be more juice behind that, so to say. There's a bit of a push in that direction. This North Node can certainly help to disseminate when it comes to publishing and with regard to the impact of what's published from you. Now, we also then have this South Node in Virgo in your third house, and this is an area of release, of trying not to over-rely along these lines. And with this being in Virgo and in the third house, communication and your thinking patterns, especially along the lines of like short term or small things, there's a need to release along those lines. So in terms of over-analysis, or in terms of like communication style, decision making, if there's any sort of a major hesitation that you typically feel, maybe being of two minds or worrying about fallout, worrying about consequences of like little things, or or the way that you say something. The little details are what comes through with the third house with Virgo there as well. This is something that you may feel like you do kind of naturally, of overthinking what you're saying or overthinking what you're interacting with in terms of information or day-to-day experiences, how you take that in. There's an encouragement here to be a little bit less perfectionistic or rigid or over-analyzing along those lines. So embracing imperfection, embracing all sorts of different perspectives and things like this, and feeding that into the way that you interact with the world on that day-to-day basis and with those little details is definitely encouraged around this time as well. So also then those perfectionist tendencies in day-to-day tasks, if you release those, it's likely that there's going to be some kind of a physical kind of release as well. So when we get stressed about these things, we tend to hold that stress in our bodies as well. And so that may be also why I was kind of called to also mention those kind of healing modalities and yoga and all of these kinds of practices. It really is all about releasing that tension from your body. And so ultimately what this is bringing in is a balance with regard to that kind of detailed thinking orientation that you have and the focus on those details with the bigger picture, those broader kind of more intuitive, maybe a little bit more messy kind of insights that you have and that you can bring in also from others out in the world. Different ways of doing things, different ways of orienting, say, your day or the way that you go about things to maybe bring in a little bit more magic to your day to day so that you're able to feel more inspired along those lines as well. But yeah, that is pretty much what I have for you, Cancer. Okay, so for Leo, we have the North Node in Pisces in the 8th house here, and we have the South Node in Virgo in your 2nd house. So this is really deeply about trust with regard to your sense of security. So try a need to release along those lines, a need to develop that trust. And this is likely to bring in, again, kind of a transformation of your inner self, that area of yourself that is quite vulnerable. Again, when we're talking about trust and security, these are things that we hold pretty deeply. And so there's a transformation along those lines as well. So there's a need to then surrender control for the sake of security, and then embrace a greater trust with regard to other people in shared resources, also in intimacy with others, in your own ability to be vulnerable without feeling that you are not secure. So to some extent, this can orient you more toward building up your own strength so that you are able to lessen your reliance on boundaries. So if you're really robust personally, then you can let those guards down a bit, because those things that come in and that may feel a little bit uncomfortable or something along those lines don't have as great of an impact, because again, when we're talking about trust, it's the trust of yourself that ultimately fuels your trust of others. So deepening that trust in yourself, your own strength, your own stability, regardless of how things go with others, can enable you to let those guards down a bit. And so you're encouraged to work on that throughout this period of time. Now, there's also healing that is encouraged here, but it's more along these lines of this kind of, again, the underlying strength. This could be through some sort of a mystical tradition. Psychology is going to be a thing throughout this period of time. So a lot of this is speaking to major kind of psychological undercurrents, your patterning, your sense of dependency and how you feel about that. So that's going to play in very strongly to this as well. So again, developing greater trust with others and yourself. And again, that trust in yourself, it can help to open you up to trusting others, because then to an extent, it kind of doesn't matter what they do if, one, you haven't rushed into something because of a lack of a sense of security. You can trust yourself to see red flags along the way. You can trust yourself to be able to pick up the pieces of yourself and to not then worry about someone else if something winds up falling out in a way that kind of requires that. But then additionally, not feeling like being vulnerable is being raw. There's still security there if those resources, those reserves are robust. And again, this is definitely going to imply something along the lines of working through dependencies, whether it be interdependency and becoming a little bit more comfortable along those lines, or codependency and healing some of that, or even the power dynamics with regard to dependency that can arise and looking that square in the face, and then possibly then needing to work that out such that you don't feel that your dependency on someone else is causing you to have less control over your own life, your own resources, and so forth. Additionally, there could be major contracts or investments implied here, joining resources with someone else as well. It's likely to arise through events in little fits throughout this period of time. So different contracts may arise. Investment opportunities can arise along this time as well. And so what this is also speaking to with the South Node in Virgo in the second house is, since you naturally have Virgo in the second house, there can be a bit of a perfectionism around material security, financial security, your control over your resources on a micro level. So really focusing in on the details of that, there's a request here that you not focus too much on the specific details along those lines, but rather to have a greater kind of spiritual faith and spiritual trust that things are going to be okay, even if you're not continually looking at, the analytics of a certain situation or whatnot along those lines. Additionally, if there are any sort of self-worth issues around achievements or the resources that you have, you're definitely encouraged to let that go, to release that around this period of time. Not comparing yourself to others is going to be really important also. Not doing things just because you feel that other people think that you should is going to be really critical around this time as well. Additionally, trusting your intuition with regard to your security is also encouraged here too. And I would double that encouragement because, again, sometimes if we don't take these things on board ahead of time, there can be kind of lessons that arise that will force our hand, so to say. So, for instance, you could receive what looks like awesome, perfect advice from an expert, and it can be super practical and everything can look really good and really clean. And then the off chance that say an investment or something like this could have gone wonky and you felt on some level like a little bit weird about it, but you didn't listen to that kind of a thing where you're not releasing could certainly arise as a lesson. So again, I would definitely take that on board of listening to your intuition when it comes to your finances, your resources, and things like this. Also, even in terms of relationships. So again, this can have to do with dependencies and security and the way that we have relationships with people. So if you get a gut feeling or like a kind of a weird like sick feeling in your stomach or whatever it is that arises for you that you know is kind of an intuitive sign that you shouldn't get deeply involved with someone, really try your best to listen to that. That's how you're going to develop the trust muscles with yourself to be able to let those guards down. Because sometimes the types of people who want to get us into those kind of dependent situations because of the fact that they have a sense of lack along those lines, can hone in on a sense of a lack of trust within oneself of someone else, and can kind of, sense that and pick up on that and try and utilize that. So again, this is all about building up the trust of self that enables you to listen to those instincts, listen to that intuition, and not feel the need to shut it off just because something looks shiny and nice, you know? So yeah, that is pretty much what I have for you, Leo. Okay, so for Virgo, we have the North Node in Pisces in your seventh house, and we have the South Node in Virgo in your first house. So this is really all about how you do relationships, how you see yourself in relation with others. So there's a focus during this time on those relationships, as well as your growth through those partnerships and those relationships. It's very likely that you'll see new relationships enter your life. And you may also see the phasing out of other relationships, simultaneous or concurrent with new individuals or groups that are coming into your life as well. So there's also a major focus with Pisces here in your seventh house of compassion and intuition within your personal relationships and within those dynamics. And I would really encourage making sure that that's a two-way street, that you're receiving that as well as you are offering that, and also that you are offering it to yourself just as much as you're offering it to others. So thinking these things through, kind of mulling over how it is that you interact in relationships is really encouraged around this period of time. So I would actually, one, keep an eye on how relationships play out, how you and others interact with each other. But I would also possibly set aside some time to actually think these things through and to focus on this a bit, because there can be major breakthroughs along these lines that can really help to orient you toward, with the nodal axis, there's this concept of like maturation, so of growth, of development of yourself throughout your life. And so there's an opportunity again to grow through your relationships around this time. So it's not just like, oh, new people are coming in, there's new relationships. It's also on a personal level, especially with the South Node also then in your first house, to develop and mature your own concept of yourself as well. And there could be also major, like really important relationships that wind up either developing further throughout this period of time or being introduced into your life as well. Trying to also be really like flexible with others and releasing some expectations will also really only help when you have the North Node in Pisces in your seventh too. Now with that South Node in Virgo in your first, with the South Node, we tend to be asked to release or let go of something, to not over rely on it. So any sort of kind of like critical tendencies with regard to yourself, with regard to your identity, you're asked to release that or to not over rely on that with regard to, again, the way that you see yourself, but then also the way that you imagine yourself to be within the world with regard to other people. Often when we're dealing with the nodal axis along the first and seventh houses, we can also get some mirroring effects and projection back and forth as well. So your perception of how you think that other people perceive you is probably really important. And I think that you're being asked to release that a lot during this period of time. So try not to also then overanalyze your own personal choices, your own, again, that personal growth that you're going through. Try not to overthink that. You could totally do that with Virgo rising, is to try and make sure that things are healthy. But by trying to make sure that things are healthy, try to kind of exert control over the path. But the thing is, when the North Node is in Pisces, we can't do that. We do need to have a lot of faith in allowing for things to unfold as they do and trusting the fact that even if things look like something we don't want, they can still be really excellent for us in terms of reorienting us, in terms of causing our priorities and our, again, self-perception and perception of others to change. So for instance, someone that you really feel is like being pushed into your life that you really don't like, There can be something very likely. If that happens during this period of time, then I would really expect for it to play out this way. They're teaching you something about yourself and your perception of yourself, and then also the way that you may kind of project fears onto others about how you think that they see you. So engaging in that, engaging in the messiness of that with that North Node in Pisces, it may feel like something that is objectively not something you want in your life, of course, but there's still something there that can help you to grow and help you to mature, even in the relationships you do want in your life. So there's not going to be a huge amount of personal control over how that growth occurs around this period of time, is basically, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to get at there. Overanalyzing isn't really going to help during this period of time, because things are not logical and rational when we're dealing with Pisces there. So yeah, there is self-improvement going on. There does need to be an openness to others and an allowance for others to be who they are, to be imperfect, to even be something that you don't quite like, but needing to allow for that because of the fact that Pisces is here. Pisces is all about saying yes to kind of all different types of people, regardless of their identity, regardless of their philosophy. That comes up with Pisces a lot as well. There's an embrace of the universal and the fact that everyone is inside of the circle. And through allowing for that circle to include everything, there's something that is teaching you about the value of your own self, and the fact that you truly don't need to worry what other people think of you. You can just be you and allow for other people to be them. And you don't have to like them, but it's through having a great deal of genuine security in who you are, in your own identity, in your own view of things, that people that you don't like then can't quite shake you. They can't quite cause you to question that, which I think often is what we're trying to avoid when we try to avoid specific types of people. And I'm, of course, completely guilty of this myself. There are certain people I really don't like, and I try and build up those walls. But it's like, do you really need those walls if you're really secure in yourself, such that whatever it is that they do doesn't genuinely have a real impact on you? So yeah, reworking those boundaries, even reworking the sense of what those boundaries ultimately are for. And it's not just about releasing those boundaries. We can allow for our circle to expand, pretty maximally, while still understanding if something's not healthy, don't let it into you, your soul, your spirit, your heart. You can allow it to be and let it be without letting it affect you. Just because someone asks you to do something doesn't mean that you have to do it, but they can still be allowed to ask, and you can say no. So yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Virgo. Okay, so for Libra, we have the North Node in Pisces in your 6th house, and we have the South Node in Virgo in your 12th house. So this is really all about finding a balance between your kind of spiritual nature as well as your daily routine. So there's going to be changes along these lines, but this is meant to help you to bring in more of that kind of spiritual perception, spiritual orientation to your daily life, your daily routine. The 6th house also speaks to health and well-being. So there is a focus on that throughout this period of time. But it's not just about like physical health and well-being. It's much more holistic than that. It's about finding time for self-care, making sure that you make that a priority, having compassion for yourself, having compassion for those around you, feeling connected to those around you in your daily life, making sure that they also are having compassion for you and your personal well-being when it comes to the tasks and routines that you are trying to maintain around this period of time. There is a need for flexibility along these lines too, around productivity and flow. So allowing for that to come a little bit more naturally. There will be ebbs and flows, certainly, But embracing the fact that you have Pisces here and that you need to be flexible with yourself and with others along these lines will definitely be necessary and called for around this period of time as well. Now, this could also be changes that you experience through your coworkers or employees. So this is also an area of work, daily tasks, things like this, but it can also have to do with the people that are implied there. So employees and then also coworkers. Bosses is more up in the 10th house, so it's a little bit less along those lines, unless, again, they impact your daily routine. Then it would be through that vector that this would be impacting you. But what's interesting about this is there could be changes that, say, your coworkers, say if you work for a company, changes that they're going through that you're kind of seeing vicariously through them. So it's experiencing those things through that lens of someone that you're working with. Now, also, there could be then also changes in terms of the actual people. So there could be people moving on, new people coming in, and that having some impact on your life as well. So needing to be flexible along those lines, say if you work on a team and someone leaves and then someone else has to come in and they need to be trained and everything, you are definitely asked to be flexible and open with them while they are kind of getting a hang of the situation in a place maybe that you've been working for a while and you know how things go, but being patient with them is definitely called for. Now, with the South Node in your 12th house in Virgo, there could be for you naturally a bit of wanting to kind of nail down your spirituality, so to say. There can be a bit of a perfectionism there. So releasing that perfectionism is helpful throughout this period of time. So allowing for things to not come with evidence, allowing for things to come through on the basis of faith is going to be pretty important. And it could be a little bit self-sabotaging if you do try to, say, reject out of hand things that you don't quite have evidence for. Additionally, periods of solitude, the ritualization of your spiritual practice could be a way for you to find a little bit of balance in that, of trying to have some sort of control over something while still being flexible over it. Could be through some sort of a ritual practice that will be important for you to develop around this period of time as well. And that then helping you to be more flexible with those in your day-to-day, your like mundane life, so to say, with the 6th house here as well. Now with the health orientation here, again, because we have Pisces in your 6th and then we have Virgo in your 12th, a lot of this is around subconscious matters, or again, holistic matters when it comes to health. So more broad than just physical health, more broad even than just psychological health. But if there are any kind of fears that arise or patterns that you find with regard to your conditioning, then the type of healing that's called for around this period of time is just holding that space, expanding that space of what's acceptable to you, to try and make more acceptable things that you may have tried to control and reform in order to get it to a place where you're comfortable with it, but allowing for a bit of that messiness with the North Node in Pisces there. Also, overanalysis can get you into analysis paralysis, of course. And this, again, it's probably something that you subconsciously experience throughout your life naturally with Virgo in the 12th there. And that is ultimately what this is calling up to be released throughout this time, is, again, trying to make things perfect before they're acceptable, and instead embracing the imperfection, including that in the circle of what's acceptable, so to say. Also, finding a balance between the time that you hold for yourself, the time that you hold for your spiritual practice, healing, and so on, with the tasks that you have at hand, with the focus that you hold with regard to your personal mundane life, the routine and the things that need to get done. This isn't really a time to go overboard with regard to your work ethic such that it is at all compromising to your health. There does really need to be a balance here. And that's ultimately what's called for around this time. Now, there can be matters of health that wind up arising in little changes along those lines. And it's not just a negative thing like, oh, a health scare or something like that. It could potentially be, but it could be any number of things. So it could be even with a healthcare plan or with a doctor. You may wind up having to change doctors or having to take another one on board or something like this. You could also find resolution of a health issue through, again, releasing some perfectionistic qualities within yourself to where you're able to release some of that tension that goes along with that. And that could alleviate, for instance, some tension in your body or possibly even like inflammation or something along these lines. Being fluid with yourself will certainly be helpful to your health around this period of time. And again, pay attention to the conditioning with those subconscious patterns that wind up playing out. If you're able to actually take some time to analyze, trying not to overanalyze it, but if you're able to look at that square in the face, I think that'll also be helpful around this time to allow for that release, that relaxation for you. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Libra. Okay, so for Scorpio, we have the North Node in Pisces in your 5th house, and the South Node in Virgo is in your 11th house. So this is bringing into question the groups that you're involved with, greater society, hopes and dreams, and then also your own personal creativity, your creative expression, your children, your hobbies, the things that you really enjoy. So there's going to be greater opportunity for creative expression, as well as developing your imagination, developing your own personal interests. And a lot of this is going to be around not worrying quite as much what other people think of these things or the input that other people may have along those lines. So embracing your own approaches to love, to joy, to the things that you do enjoy, being compassionate with yourself and others along those lines. Not feeling the need to always be on the same page with others around what's enjoyable and what's interesting, what's fascinating, and what you want to pursue. So for instance, if friends are interested in certain areas of life, say, like, for instance, if you have friends that are skeptics, with this being in Virgo here, but you find yourself a lot more spiritual, try not to feel the need to either convince them or to not be yourself with regard to your own sense of spirituality, your own intuition and things like this. So being compassionate for them, but then also yourself. And then there's nothing wrong, I think, with expecting the same of them, for them to also then allow for you to do what it is that you want and believe what it is that you want. Also following your instincts, your intuition with regard to the things that you might enjoy, that you might take on, for instance, as a hobby or maybe a genre of interest. Maybe you're pulled in a new direction with the North Node often bringing in different things into this area. You are supposed to be developing those interests. So new things that seem to spark an interest, try not to judge it. Try to really just be open to it. So yeah, letting go of rigidity in your creative pursuits, enjoying spontaneity, allowing for those things to come through intuitively, and not worrying about what you think that other people will think about those things, those interests of yours. Additionally, you could wind up having some pretty profound experiences when you're like having fun and pursuing positive experiences. They're likely to have a much stronger impact on you. Like you may find that your personal emotional highs are higher than usual. Experiencing greater joy, experiencing it on a more profound level, and maybe kind of what this is bringing in is to orient you more toward the importance of that and to prioritize that more in your life. The importance of having fun, the importance of enjoying your life. and not worrying about what other people think of that or what their judgments may be. Just because they're not able to have the fun that you are in the way that you are doesn't mean that you shouldn't, you know. Additionally, there could be some pretty profound experiences with your children, or a healthy processing and open processing of material from your childhood, be it a spiritual orientation or just the way that you generally experienced life in youth. You may have found that you were really, really open-hearted as a child. And so there may be some material that needs to be processed about then, you know, kind of the harsh realities of the world, so to say, coming in and confronting that open heart. You may feel that you need to process some of that material. And that may even wind up making you then more compassionate toward children. And you may find that you're wanting to get then involved in a group that has to do with compassionate efforts toward children. So be it some kind of a like after school program or a fostering system, or just something to help children in any sort of way. Possibly also animals. I don't know why that's coming through, maybe because the fact that Virgo's up here. But that may also be an aspect that becomes important to you, is like starting to get involved in something like that. Now, with the South Node in Virgo in the 11th house, you know, you may naturally find that you run into groups of people that kind of try to encourage you to fit into a specific mold. So try not to take on what you perceive as the rigidity of other people to affect you. I think I've been kind of saying this in different ways throughout this, but like, other people's critiques, other people's judgments, other people's perspectives aren't for you. And I think that that's something that's really going to be coming through in this period of time as insights along those lines. But also then releasing your own over-analysis of social circles, community involvement, things like this, trying not to worry about that. Whether it be not worrying about feeling the need to involve yourself in a specific type of thing. If you don't like it, then maybe you shouldn't, you know, and you maybe shouldn't feel bad about that. And maybe if there's a group that your friends would think was weird, that you are interested in getting involved with, go for it. And then again, the kind of reverse of that critique of not worrying about whether groups or organizations or communities or whatnot are having any sort of a negative reaction to you as well, just not worrying about it as much as you possibly can. So yeah, there's perfectionist tendencies also within the group projects, trying not to box in other people that are maybe involved in a group and try and exert any sort of control over what they're doing or believing or whatnot within that group as well. Now, with the South Node in that 11th house, I would definitely not be surprised to see some friends, allies, colleagues, groups, communities, or whatnot falling away, like growing apart from that. The South Node often brings up things that are being released or being let go or being, again, grown apart from or grown out of even. And that may open you up to some others that feel like they are checking more boxes, so to say, that you enjoy more. But this does speak more to the letting go of groups than it is bringing in groups, I do have to say, because of that South Node there. So yeah, ultimately what this is about is your own personal creativity, what it is that you personally enjoy, and then those group ideals. So managing your own enjoyment with that of others and not worrying about whether those two things align perfectly. With the North Node in Pisces in the 5th house, I can pretty much boil this down to follow your heart, go in the direction that your heart is pulling you, because 5th house Pisces is really all about that like heart-based intuition there. So definitely lean into that around this period of time, and it should be absolutely lovely. The 5th house is wonderful, and to have the North Node there is really, really pleasant and nice. So this should play out quite well for you. It'll probably just require some release of either, again, the perspectives of other people or specific relationships and groups and things like this. So yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Scorpio. Okay, so for Sagittarius, we have the North Node in Pisces in your fourth house, and we have the South Node in Virgo is in your 10th house. So this is going to call for a balance between your work and your home life. And it's actually orienting you a little bit more toward the home or toward your inner life than it is toward worrying about your reputation, your public standing, things like this. It's more like there's something personal that you're working through, which will then help your public standing through working through those kind of personal concerns and issues. So an emphasis on spiritual, emotional grounding, especially with regard to your home or your family or your living situation or your family in terms of your roots, like how it is that you feel about your, say, origin narrative of yourself, where you came from, your childhood, and so on. So, working through that material is encouraged also with your family. This may be something you really want to actively speak to your family about and work through actively with your family. So, connecting also on a deeper level. Talking about these things can do that kind of in and of itself. If there's something that you're feeling the need to work through, again, I really wouldn't be shy to be really pretty open about that. With Pisces here, you should find that the home environment is at least somewhat conducive to an openness. If it weren't, you probably would have left that kind of a situation anyway, because that's something that is important to you when it comes to family or people that feel like family, is that there's compassion there and that there's an openness there. So you may also wind up feeling like with the North Node, there can be a level of maturation or like outgrowing something. It's really all about, again, evolving you throughout your life. So evolving you always to the next step. And so with that playing out in your fourth house, it could be that you feel you've outgrown certain aspects of a living situation or family. And that does speak to what I was just talking about of like, it's important for you as a Sag rising with Pisces in your fourth, that home environment, that who you consider to be family is something that's really open and compassionate. So that may be one of the kind of very specific ways in which you find that you're outgrowing a situation, is if you're not finding that openness there. Especially when it comes to, attitudes toward your public standing, attitudes toward your career. If there's some kind of rigidness or judgment in your home or your family about the life path that you've chosen to pursue, then that would seem to be a pretty strong orientation toward processing this your own self, making sure that your own life aligns with your deepest values and going based on that. So this is, of course, going to require, to a great extent, letting go of control around that and trusting that intuitive guidance with regard to your personal life. But then this does also speak to your career. So it may be a little bit scary if, for instance, maybe you do need to gain some distance from something about your personal or family life. And letting go of that control can be a little bit scary. But another way that this could wind up playing out is that there's a need to move home. When you have eclipses in your house of your home, there can be pretty major changes to your home. So I would not be surprised to see that. There could definitely be an overlap of, say, career change requiring you to move, or a move requiring you to change your jobs or something like this. And there may even be a question arising for you of, well, I'm in this job here, but I really just want to move. And on the other side, I feel like there might be either a lower status within the job or maybe a little bit less money or something like this. A situation like that arising in your life is kind of what I would expect from this. So I would not be surprised to see a reorientation with regard to what's really important for you. And again, this doesn't have to be like, oh, if you move, you're going to take a pay cut. But there could be like, again, if you're starting somewhere else, or if you have different colleagues or whatnot, then there can be then a sense of needing to release your sense of control over just knowing fully the situation that you're in, because it's a different situation, so you're needing to grow through learning a new environment, learning a new job or department or something like this. Even field, possibly. With the South Node here, you may be even called straight out of whatever it is that you've been doing and towards something completely different. It's not going to be the case for everyone, but it can definitely play out that way. I do have to say in this Virgo area, and this will be especially important for you, Sagittarius, because this is your 10th house. It's a very important house. That there's far more action going on in terms of eclipses and new moons and things like this in your 10th than there is in your 4th. So, for instance, later this year, we're going to get a solar eclipse in Virgo, but immediately before that solar eclipse, we're getting a new moon in Virgo. So we're getting 2 new moons in Virgo in this autumn of 25, and one of them is going to be an eclipse. Plus, we're just getting full on solar eclipses in Virgo. We're not missing any, whereas we're not getting any solar eclipses whatsoever in Pisces. We're only getting lunar eclipses there. So I would definitely expect for there to be career changes going on, possibly for the excellent, possibly for the absolutely wonderful. But there is a sense of control that through whatever it is will need to be released in a way. So for instance, I'll give you another example. Like if you're promoted, you could feel way out of sorts or like out of your depth with a situation. And so that does require a surrender of a certain amount of control in order to reach that level. When you hit a new level like that, you haven't mastered it yet, but you probably have fully mastered the level below. So that would be another way that this could definitely wind up playing out. So releasing perfectionism in your career and public image is going to be important because there's going to be changes. You're not going to be 100% in control of this. So also any sort of like really rigid goals, they won't be completely conducive to the type of growth that you're going through around this period of time. So I would, again, try and let those go as well. This isn't about just giving up on your career, not remotely. That's a huge factor here. But any sort of rigidity, that's really what we're trying to let go of. And the reason for that is that, again, the North Node in Pisces in your 4th is really speaking to allowance and peace and comfort at your root. So emotional well-being will be very, very important. And again, work-life balance is going to be something you're going to want to keep in mind around this period of time. So ambition, try and make sure that you're being flexible with it. Try not to be too like, I'm going to go this step and then this step and then this step. And it's going to play out this way and this way and this way. And I'm going to work that relationship to get that kind of a result within my workspace or whatnot. So just try and be as flexible as you can kind of manage throughout this period of time when it comes to your career. And that's going to give you the best results here. That's going to avoid maybe some of those lessons, is that these would be the lessons that would come through if you don't kind of take them on board. Then you wind up getting those tests along those lines, and possibly being unprepared for them if you don't allow for a flexibility around this period or around this area of your life during this period of time. So yeah, I think that's what I have for you, Sagittarius. It's going to be a big year for you because these are angular. These are very important houses. That's why we have this bold line here and here. 10th and 4th, big areas of life, home, family, career. So this is going to be a pretty big and pivotal period of time for you in the coming year and a half. It's going to reorient you in terms of your life. So it should be really excellent and should set you up a lot more comfortably and better than you even have been up to this point. So that is what I have for you, Sagittarius. Okay, so for Capricorn, we have the North Node in Pisces in your 3rd house, and the South Node in Virgo is in your 9th house. So this is speaking to your ideas, your ideology, your philosophy, as well as how you deal with the world in your day-to-day life. This has to do with your communication, how you connect with others, your belief systems, and so on and so forth. So this is an area of your life that's coming up for change. And with the North Node in your 3rd house here in Pisces, you're developing even further your natural kind of compassionate communication style and your kind of intuitive communication style. You could also find that there are significant events that arise from interacting with people who show you a great deal of compassion as well. And learning can definitely come up during this period of time as very, very significant. What it is that you're reading, studying, communicating about is going to be much more profound during this period of time in terms of your life direction. So you may find that you are developing your communication or your language skills. That would be encouraged during this time, even if you're not learning a new language. Developing those communication skills can prepare you for some of the events that are likely to arise here, which will require compassionate communication. So understanding those communication skills better can really only help, as long as you're not being rigid about it, but we'll get into that in a moment. So yeah, emphasis on expression of ideas through compassionate and creative ways. You could find yourself writing during this period of time, offering more sympathy, and spending a lot of time listening during this period of time would make sense as well with that North Node in the third in Pisces, which is more focused on listening and learning from people than it is necessarily from putting forth its own ideas about something. And letting go of rigid thinking, embracing a fluid mindset around this time, being really flexible ideologically because of the fact that we have this South Node where you're being called to release in Virgo, which can be a little bit rigid. It can be a little bit perfectionistic and wanting things kind of just so, which definitely serves a purpose. But when it's in this house of ideology as well, with the South Node here, philosophy, learning, things like that coming through this house too, you're being asked to release some of those tendencies during this period of time in order to develop more and more. So you're also called to then engage with your community more. You may want to get involved in some sort of cause. Pisces tends to be well motivated by a cause, a compassionate cause. So there may be something arising within your community around you to get more involved with locally. And again, like I said, reading, studying, learning, this is just going to be a huge thing for you around this period of time. And what it is that you're taking in is going to be really important. I would also definitely mention that Pisces can be kind of sensitive to what it's taking in. And the third and the ninth houses both speak to media. So during this time, I would pay attention to how the media that you consume, be it the news or just music, the television shows, stories that you're reading, how they impact you, because you're going to learn more about yourself through paying attention to that around this period of time. I would definitely encourage that. Additionally, there can be a sense of profundity around the experiences when we're dealing with the nodal axis. So your sensitivities along those lines are going to be heightened, and the impact of those things will also be heightened. So that's something to keep in mind. And again, with the South Node in Virgo in the ninth house, this is about releasing those perfectionist tendencies with regard to belief systems and your mindset, your worldview, and so forth, any sort of dogmas or anything. Also, in terms of higher education or learning or anything like this, you may need to even take on a more fluid approach to your learning. So if you find yourself maybe a little bit more distractible than usual, you may also then need to be kind of compassionate with yourself and allow for the actual numbers or details about how much it is that you're taking in. Like, I wouldn't worry about counting the pages that you're reading or trying to hit specific marks when we have the North Node in Pisces. It's really more about quality than quantity. So are you taking it in more fully? Another thing with Pisces is that, the mind can wander in order to kind of play with ideas. So you may find that you read a sentence or even a word, and it takes you to a place where you're mulling over it a bit. So again, it's more about quality than quantity. So you may not be hitting your page count that you're wanting, for instance, but you're playing with those ideas more. And so you're actually internalizing the information in a much broader way than you would if you were just hitting those marks and consuming that information. You're playing with the information with Pisces there. And yeah, being really as open-minded as you possibly can throughout this period of time. There could be some important travel that arises for you with the South Node in the ninth house here, but it's more about what that travel will peel away from you, what it will release from you with regard to your perception and your ideas, than it will be about what you're taking on board. And yeah, again, balancing that detailed knowledge with spiritual understanding. So that's that mulling over and playing with the information that you're receiving to develop it maybe more so into practical wisdom than it is just about knowing the information, so to say. And yeah, additionally, with the third house, like I said, there's a reorientation toward community and an orientation away from global matters. So this isn't so much about the universal, it's more about how things are impacting you and those around you, much, much more so than it is a matter of global concern. So there's a release of taking that huge view and trying to sort out all of the details of it and line things up properly. It's more about being able to be within your community and be fluid and flexible and comfortable with that there than it is about trying to, again, sort out the whole and try and make it all kind of fit and make sense. So that is what I have for you, Capricorn. Okay, so for Aquarius, we have the North Node in Pisces in your second house, and we have the South Node in Virgo in your eighth house here. So this is really all about trust and security, intimacy, resources, and things like this. So your own resources and those of others need to potentially develop trust and balance along these lines. So with the North Node in Pisces in your second house, there is an opportunity to align your finances and your values with your principles. So earning through a manner that is more comfortable for you, that feels more correct, that feels just right. Pisces is very sensitive to whether things feel correct or not. And it's not really looking for evidence. It's, again, looking for how it feels about things. So there's an opportunity to align and develop along those lines with the North Node here as well. And that may involve some creativity. There may also be matters of compassion involved in your earning, but also then your spending habits. So you may find yourself more charitable around this period of time, as well as opportunities for generosity arising. And of course, always be careful with money and so on and so forth. But if that arises, it's probably important to really consider that, because you are oriented toward that. You are encouraged to lean in that direction of creativity and compassion when it comes to your spending and then also your earning. So that kind of material perfectionism, this isn't really the time for it. Again, this is more a time for following your intuition along these lines and holding and releasing as you feel you are urged to do internally. You could also find that there are new streams of revenue, opportunities for investment could arise. I would not rely necessarily on co-signing, though that could be something that may present itself around this time. And I would think that through with the South Node in the eighth house. This is more along the lines of co-signing, but you're probably feeling the need to be more financially independent and self-secure around this time, which is why I mentioned there can definitely be investments that arise, but it might be that you feel most comfortable doing this yourself. But yeah, with the North Node, things can increase or they can also start or initiate. So there could be a new stream of revenue that arises around this time or an increase in your revenue. It is also notable that throughout most of the time that the North Node is in Pisces, your second house is ruled by Jupiter, and this North Node will be ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter for most of that is going to be in Cancer, and it'll be in your sixth house of your work and routine and things like this. So that's pretty fortunate for finance. I would think that things should be going pretty well along those lines. And again, developing boundaries, not rigid boundaries, not where it's like, no, this is mine and this is my security. This is the basis of my security and I can't let anyone into this. But more along the lines of, again, like I was saying, not feeling the need to co-sign with someone else for something, not feeling the need to get others involved in your investments or your revenue or whatnot, but being open to fluidity and flexibility with that as you feel intuitively drawn to do that, not based on what other people are saying or what they're inputting. So yeah, with that South Node in Virgo in the 8th house here, the South Node tends to be an area where we wind up releasing or we are called to not over rely upon. So with that being in Virgo and in your 8th house, there can be a detail orientation to shared resources. So hopefully not literally like accounts between you and like relatives where you're keeping count of things, but that could be something. If that is something, you're definitely oriented here toward not keeping like quantitative track of these things. But this is also an area of psychological depth and emotional depth with regard to our vulnerability when it comes to other people and so forth. So also releasing control along those lines with regard to shared resources or emotional depth. Again, not keeping count, not focusing on the details so much along those lines, but more so how does it make you feel? If you're helping someone out, say in your family around this period of time, maybe focus a little bit less on, oh, is this creating dependence in them? And focus maybe a little bit more on the fact that it can be really nice to help someone out. And sometimes that is the leg up that someone needs, just as one example. So also, for instance, like I was saying with charity, for instance, if you see someone who is suffering like out in the world and you are intuitively feeling like I could help this person out, like give them 10 or whatever, any sort of voices that come through to you of like, oh, well, they're just going to spend it on, whatever, I would quell that pretty quickly, because often if we resist a transit, it can come through in other ways in terms of lessons, and judging people who are in need is, I think, one of the most dangerous of those, of needing a lesson around that, so I would definitely quell that voice as quickly as possible. And then again, if you're feeling the need to help someone out, do so. Don't worry about, is it creating dependence, blah, blah, blah. The South Node is there. You're being asked not to focus on that. And additionally, when it comes to intimacy and connection with others, trying to release critical attitudes toward that as well. It's not so much about, well, what have you done for me lately? It's more about, how do you make me feel? That's what should be most important around this time. And again, finding a balance between independence and shared emotional experiences. And this I think is really the crux of it, is the emotionality of connection, quality over quantity. This isn't about what can you do for me or what have you done for me recently, so to say. This is about, how does being part of a broader whole, how does being part of the kind of highly emotionally charged and emotionally connected humanity that we exist within, what's the value of that to you? I think it's very high because you have Pisces in your second house, So embracing the fact that that's really actually quite important to you, I think is going to be really important around this period of time. But yeah, as far as money goes, it looks good. I wouldn't be too rigid about holding on to it either, because likely also this is going to play out as getting more than you give. Like creating that flow through also the outflow and the compassion of the outflow, and that kind of fueling the compassion, so to say, of like the universe to offer that back to you in various different ways. So we're all dependent on the connection that we have spiritually, and on that working out, and on that being compassionate and considerate of us. None of us are perfect. So ensuring that we're not judging others too much as well for what they need from the universe, and being able to be a vector of that when we're able. It's I think often the case that we're put along each other's paths to help each other out. So I think that's going to be a pretty important and strong orientation to have towards security and resources and things like that during this period of time for you. But yeah, that is pretty much what I have for you, Aquarius. Okay, so for Pisces, last but not least, we have the North Node is in your first house in Pisces, and we have the South Node in Virgo in your seventh house here. So this is really all about you and who you are, what you enjoy, what you like about yourself, what you want to develop about yourself, with some consideration of how your relationships impact that. I'm trying to balance that out. So this coming year and a half or so, when we have the North Node in your first, the orientation here that's encouraged is much, much, much more for you toward yourself than it is toward others. So with that North Node in your first house, a major emphasis on your own personal growth, your own personal self-expression, the maturation of your own comfort with yourself and your expression, getting much more in tune with that, and much more comfortable with releasing yourself as you are out into the world to be accepted, rejected, whatever. It doesn't matter. What matters is how you feel about yourself during this period of time. So working through all of that. And this is likely to also be a part of a personal spiritual growth with yourself as well, with this being in Pisces. These things are going to be overlapping around this time, your expression and your spiritual perspective on things, like how you feel it is that you're called to express yourself. So opportunities arising for you to more and more embrace your intuition, also your creativity with Pisces here, and your compassion. These are all natural inclinations of yours, just straightforwardly. It's your first house. It's not like a sector of your life, it's you. So having Pisces here and having that North Node in Pisces, you're going to identify really strongly with this North Node just because it's very natural. So your own intuition, your own creativity, whether this be through some sort of a language, which Pisces, weirdly enough, as the place that Mercury least likes to be, Pisces can play with Mercury in a very fascinating way. And language is something that I think Pisces really enjoys to play with. So whether this be song or theater or some other kind of creative expression, that creativity is also really important to Pisces. So developing that around this time frame of pretty much until next summer, when we have the node move on, then is going to be really important, and you're going to have a lot of opportunities along those lines, and you're encouraged to follow that. And also to, again, like I've been saying, like I'm going to keep saying, not allow for the judgments of others to impact that during this period of time. This is all about maturation of yourself. So again, shifts as well, maturation, how you see yourself, becoming more comfortable with that, feeling like you're on the same page with yourself more, and opportunities arising for that to be the case increasingly throughout this time as well. And the thing is, like, I don't think that it's you that's changing. I think it's how you see yourself that's changing. And ordinarily with the North Node in a sign, this decides where the eclipses are. So you would think, right, that there's going to be a solar eclipse in Pisces during this time. There's not. It's very weird. The first solar eclipse is going to be in Aries. The second solar eclipse is going to be in Aquarius. And that's pretty much all that we're getting in terms of solar eclipses on this side while this is going on, just because of the timing of the shift of the nodal axis. So it's not like there's something that you're bringing in that is completely out of the ordinary, that is just a total game changer of who you are. Ultimately, because what we're experiencing here is nodal eclipses, it's more about the emotional vector, the reflection of, again, how you see yourself that's changing. And so I think that there's also, weirdly enough, with the North Node here, typically that's not so much releasing things, but with lunar eclipses, it is. So I think that it's through the shedding of the judgments of others, which is what Virgo in the seventh house speaks to, that you're embracing who you actually deeply are. And so, of course, impacting how you see yourself, embracing that. So releasing those rigid self concepts, allowing fluidity in identity. I think a lot of those rigid self concepts are coming from a projection from you, probably based on experience, of course, a projection from you onto others about what you think that they're projecting onto you. I think that this is an area of, interconnection and interrelationships that we overlook often, is that there is so much that's being batted back and forth that isn't even real on the other side. I think that we tend to be very judgmental of ourselves because we imagine that other people are being judgmental to us in those ways. And maybe we've run across people who were probably the especially rude ones and especially judgmental ones who would actually say things like that. Even, most of us, even if we do feel a certain way about someone, we can feel that way and we can still hold space for well, they're not me, so that's fine, whatever, So that would be an experience that you probably would have in your life with Virgo in your seventh house, is running across people like that. And also with Virgo there, that's Mercury. It's also probably going to be said to you. So do understand that the things that people say to you are probably the worst of what they think in terms of the ones that actually come out and say things, but also then really, of course, it's all based on other people's insecurities. We don't do this to other people when we feel fine about ourselves. Again, really, maybe even if you're being a little bit rigid with yourself, it might be really useful to take note of that. And then when you have a moment to think that through, try and follow that thread. Try and find, when did I start thinking this about myself? When did I start limiting myself in this way? And probably you're going to find someone else at the end of that thread. It's not really then about you. And hopefully then you can kind of release that and let that go. Now, additionally, a lot of our motivations also come from the first house here. So developing a better understanding of your own motivations through this greater process that you're going through will also be pretty important throughout this time as well. And yeah, of course, with the South Node in Virgo in your seventh house, releasing perfectionist tendencies in partnerships. Again, I'm going to point out, for those of us with this happening angular, the mutable signs here, it's really important, the fact that we're not getting those solar eclipses in Pisces. But on the other hand, it's a total trip. We're getting a lot of action in Virgo. So especially this autumn, we're not only getting a solar eclipse in Virgo, but the same month, it's not supposed to happen this way, we're getting another new moon in Virgo. So we're getting two new moons in Virgo in the August-September timeframe. The black moon, which is the second new moon in a row in the same sign or the same month, that one is going to be an eclipse. So we're getting a ton of action. We're not missing any eclipses within this area as well. So there's actually kind of more focus on that release on the other side. So with that said, I would definitely expect for you to be releasing some relationships around this time, probably due to the critical nature of certain people in your life. So that's something to keep in mind. Don't take it personally. It's not you. It may not even be them. This is a matter of maturation and growth. You're growing apart. That's really the only way that you really need to conceive of that, if that or when that winds up occurring. Now, because of the fact that we do have solar eclipses over there, that can bring in things. So you may actually, even though it's the South Node, you could wind up with people entering your life who are more in alignment with you and who hopefully are not rigid in the ways that could potentially continue to make you uncomfortable. And additionally, it will be important for you to not do that to others too. It's probably a little bit less coming from you than from others, just because you have Pisces rising. This tends not to be the case with Pisces, but that can go outward onto relationships sometimes too, when that's in the 7th house. Also with this, if you feel like you're a little bit up in the air as a Pisces, you may find that you rely on others to ground you or to check you, basically, to make sure that what you're saying or what you're doing is sound, is practical. There is a request here for you to not rely too heavily on others and their perceptions of things, and rather to kind of embrace the fact that, yeah, throughout your whole life, you may be a little bit up in the air. That's Pisces. That's, it's what we do. So also not over analyzing relationships, focusing rather on mutual empathy. Again, not over analyzing relationships, but also not over analyzing what you think other people think of you. That kind of a thing is going to be important during this period of time. And yeah, balancing your self-development with relationship harmony. You probably tend to focus a little bit more on other people naturally as a Pisces rising. Making sure that you have the time for you, not worrying about if you feel maybe a little bit more isolated. People are going to be entering your life throughout this time. So if you find that certain relationships that kind of need maintenance in order to maintain, for lack of a better term, start to fall away, try not to feel inclined or try not to react to that I need to go and message this person and maintain this relationship. Allowing things to happen and to flow, to be very fluid throughout this time is going to be very, very helpful when we have the North Node in Pisces there. So just basically try not to worry too much about that. And yeah, overall, just developing healthy boundaries and relationship habits. And, people are going to say what they're going to say. That's kind of part of the thing for you with Virgo in the 7th house. That'll continue. People will say some things that just kind of rub you the wrong way sometimes. But the more secure that you can be in, I'm just going to say this bluntly, like the fact that you're probably a bit of a mess with Pisces, and I can say this because I have a lot of Pisces stuff, we just kind of are. We don't really do things in these kind of perfect ways. That, again, like I said, that's just kind of how we are. So the more that you can embrace that, and I think that's really what you're being asked to do around this period of time, the better, because then there's an extent to which boundaries can even imply that there is a level of rawness to your own sense of vulnerability that isn't being dealt with. I mean, ideally, people should be able to say what they say. And if you don't agree with it, that you're just whatever about it, ideally. Of course, we're not perfect. We're Pisces, and this is life, and things are messy. But the more that you can notice that when people are snide or kind of crappy, that it doesn't bother you, the stronger that ultimately you are underneath, So yeah, working on those boundaries, working on those relationship habits, trying to make sure that you're not over serving others, for sure. That's excellent. That's important. That's behavioral on your part. But when it comes to other people's behavior and the way that can be uncomfortable sometimes, if you're really strong in yourself and you don't like something about a person, you don't need them, So you can just kind of grow in your own way and not have to worry about it. Or if you do like them and they're just different than you in some way, and maybe they talk a little bit too much about how they're different from you, then maybe you're also able to just like water off a duck's back, just allow that to be and feel comfortable with that. So developing those boundaries, but then also questioning, is this really necessary? And if it is, does that say anything about my sense of self, that maybe I'm allowing other people to impact that a little bit too much? But yeah, that is pretty much what I have for you, Pisces.